All right, without further delay, thank you again for joining Advocates for Ohio's Future for our Removing Barriers to Work webinar. Today, our speakers are going to share what programs are in place to support working Ohioans, how programs like SNAP Employment and Training, the Earned Income Tax Credit, and child care can boost employment, and how these vital work supports are faring in the state budget. If you've never been on a webinar with AOF before, I wanted to share with you a little bit about who we are. We're a statewide coalition of almost 500 local and statewide organizations and thousands of individual advocates like you who come together to work to make Ohio a great place for all Ohioans to live and work. That means that we focus on policies that help Ohioans participate in the economy, be healthy and safe in their communities, and afford life's basics like food, housing, health care, and transportation. It also means that we believe that a job should always mean a living and allow all Ohioans the opportunity to lift themselves and their families out of poverty. To make it our vision of Ohio reality, we advocate for strong health and human services like the work supports we're going to talk about today to keep people from falling into long-term deep poverty. After the webinar, like I said, you will receive a follow-up email with the slides, recording, and other resources, and you'll also be included in our email list going forward to receive periodic calls to action, invitations to other webinars, and new resources that will help you better understand and advocate for smart budget and policy decisions in Ohio. We hope that you'll continue to stay connected and advocate with us, but you do have the opportunity to unsubscribe at any time using the link we include in every email. If your organization supports AOF's mission and goals, I encourage you to join our statewide network by endorsing our coalition as an organizational member. We are pleased to present today's webinar with our longtime partners at Policy Matters Ohio. We're going to hear first from Halbert, who is a workforce researcher, and then from Kalitha, Policy Liaison, and finally from Wendy, Patton, the Senior Project Director. All right, I am going to turn the presentation over to Hannah to tell us more about how expanding Ohio's SNAP Employment and Training Program can help more Ohioans find and maintain meaningful employment. Hannah?
Thanks. Hi, Rebecca. Hi, everyone out there in webinar land. Thanks for joining us to talk about work supports today. It's a really beautiful day, so we really do appreciate you spending your lunch hour on the web with us learning about these policies. I'm Hannah. I'm workforce researcher at Policy Matters Ohio. Policy Matters works to create a more vibrant, equitable, sustainable, and inclusive Ohio through research, coalition building, policy advocacy, and outreach, kind of like the stuff we're doing here with you all today. And we're going to cover three programs, SNAP Employment and Training, the Earned Income Tax Credit, and child care. Each of these support people trying to break into the labor market or make ends meet in our low-wage, slow-growth economy. And for each program, there are policy reforms needed that could really make them work more effective both for working people and for our state. And by making these work support policies stronger, we really can help build an economy that works better for all of us. So I will kick things off by talking about SNAP to Skills and how Ohio can expand education and training resources without limiting food assistance. So it can be jarring to learn that here in wealthy America, where so many have so much, there's still a lot of people that skip meals or go hungry because they don't have enough money to buy food. Ohio is tied for sixth in the nation for people in this excruciating position. The Food Assistance Program, it was once called SNAP, and now it's commonly referred to, or once called Food Stamps, is now called SNAP, which stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, really does make a big dent in hunger and poverty in the state. The most recent data from the Federal Nutrition Service, SNAP food benefits reduced the share of Ohio participants living in deep poverty by 10 percentage points and increased the share living above the poverty line by 10 percentage points. So this is a big change, and it means that more children, elderly, and people with disabilities can afford to eat. Securing employment that pays enough and is stable enough to eliminate the need for assistance is a pretty tough bar in Ohio's economy. As this table shows, 7 of Ohio's 10 most common jobs would leave a family of 3 still eligible for food aid, and that's working full-time year-round and earning a typical wage for that occupation. Nearly a third of all Ohio jobs are in occupations with a median annual wage that's below poverty for a family of 4. Ohio is 33rd among states for the share of poverty wage work. This economic reality makes work requirements and time limits particularly challenging in Ohio. So without targeted education, training, and support to reduce employment barriers, people are just not likely to have real traction in the job market. Ohio's current SNAP state plan suggests that the vast majority of participants, more than 35,000, will meet their work requirements at a work experience program or a WEP assignment. Typical WEP placements include things like janitorial duties, grounds maintenance, office work, warehouse work, the kinds of experience many in the program already reporting having, and the kinds of jobs that at the median may not pay enough to actually reduce need. For fewer recipients, about 16,400 will receive education and training assistance, and that can include literacy skills, vocational training, or post-secondary education. In short, the assistance available to many of the participants does little to address underlying employability barriers or the fact that without additional targeted training, many of the jobs available just won't pay enough at the median to alleviate the need for assistance. And given budget constraints, many counties just do not have the resources in funding or staff to do more. So recognizing this conundrum, the need for skills-based employment and training services and the need for additional resources to make that possible, the Federal Food and Nutrition Service has created the SNAP to Skills initiative. Among other suggestions to improve SNAP employment and training programs, the initiative highlights how states can use 50% reimbursement grants to supplement state or third-party spending on programs that help SNAP recipients engage in education and training. These reimbursement funds can reimburse the state, county, or other third-party providers on things like administrative expenses, tuition, fees, case management, career guidance, and job development initiatives and spending that goes to help SNAP recipients. And this form of funding is unique because there's no cap on the annual federal reimbursement level, and the reimbursements, if spent on qualifying activities or costs, are also reimbursable. For example, say you could spend $100 in reimbursable services, you get $50 back in reimbursement. That money can then be used to expand capacity, putting $150 into the training program. So then that $150 can then qualify for 50% reimbursement and so on and so on. So you can see how the grants are really designed to help increase service capacity. And that's really the goal, to help states and local partners build education and training capacity to serve more SNAP recipients. Other states already have robust programs. Washington State used the reimbursable grant model to build an extensive network of employment and training services. That state used third-party match agreements where community colleges and community-based organizations and nonprofits provided education, training, and other services that reduced barriers to employment. That program serves about 28,000 individuals a year. It involves the entire community and technical college network in the state, more than 30 community partners, and has an annual budget of more than $30 million. Now, in contrast to Washington State, Ohio, remember, anticipates serving just over 16,000 in education and training this year, while more than 116,000 SNAP recipients are projected to be in that able-bodied adults without dependence category, who without intervention and skill advancement may lose access to food assistance without gaining any marketable skills, and that's an outcome that really serves no one. So in some ways, SNAP to Skills is pretty simple. It's a program to ensure that the hungry are fed, and for those who can benefit, provide education and training that can help reduce need. And we've made 3 recommendations to start expanding these services in Ohio. First is that these programs need to be voluntary. These programs can be great resources, but they can leave participants worse off if people are mandated to participate in a way that really threatens their food assistance. High-performing programs are voluntary. The Washington State model exempted all SNAP recipients from ENT programs and operates on an all-optional, all-voluntary basis. And that state found that this change allows the program partners to avoid administrative burdens of tracking and reporting hours and managing compliance. Instead, partners can focus on helping students gain skills, the skills necessary for better paying jobs, and in meeting employer workforce needs. Now, even with the voluntary program, the Washington State model does serve more in education and training services than Ohio's currently mandatory program. So people will participate without the need for mandates if the services offered are meaningful. The second recommendation is that the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services should collaborate with the Department of Higher Ed to convene a skill-based SNAP ENT planning group, really to develop a plan for expanding skill-based SNAP ENT in the state. And the committee could work to identify state spending that could currently qualify for the 50% reimbursement grants and to outline a process for local partners and partnerships to participate in the reimbursement program. And then finally, we recommend that the state fund create a fund to spur development of SNAP reimbursement eligible training initiatives and these local partnerships. So we identified $1 million in state money that previously supported ITT Tech. ITT Tech was a proprietary school that closed last year after investigations found the company misled students about placement rates, pressured students into predatory loans, and had a couple of executives accused of fraud by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So ITT will not be missing this money. Instead, we think the state should redirect this fund to SNAP ENT to help spur these high-quality training programs for needy Ohioans and help start drawing down some of that federal reimbursement money to support this work. With the advocacy support of AOF, the food banks, and the Ohio Poverty Law Center, these recommendations have been captured in Amendment HC 1476, which we hope to see in the House version of the budget. We're going to continue advancing SNAP to Skills through that budget process, and we encourage you all to learn more and to let your legislators know that you want people who receive SNAP to have access to skill-based employment and training services. So if you're interested in these issues or interested in taking action on this, we have a full brief and testimony on our website. It's searchable under SNAP to Skills, and folks on the call should feel free to reach out to me anytime with questions or for an update. So with that, I will hand the baton to my colleague Kalitha Williams to talk about the State Earned Income Tax Credit. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Hannah, and good morning to everybody on the webinar today. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to learn more about these important programs that we're trying to advance at the state level, which hopefully, when they're passed, you see the impact in your local communities. I'm going to be talking today about the state earned income tax credit. Okay, great. So many of you may be familiar with the federal earned income tax credit. It's been around for several decades, and it is, in fact, the nation's most powerful anti-poverty program. In 2005, it lifted over 6.5 million people out of poverty, including over 3 million children. The program allows low-wage families to take care of their basic needs by allowing them to claim a credit. You should know that the state EITC rewards work, and it is only available to families that has at least one worker. It also makes the tax system fairer. We know that low-wage workers already pay other taxes, Social Security, Medicare, sales tax, and other use taxes, and that low-wage workers pay a larger share of their income on taxes than upper-income Ohioans. And the earned income tax credit stimulates the local economy. Low-wage workers use their refunds to purchase things through local stores and vendors like housing, food, transportation. And there's actually been research that's actually quantified the economic boom, stating that for every $1 refunded into the community, that is every dollar of refunds that make it into a community, it actually can create up to $2 of economic benefit. The way the credit works is that the federal earned income tax credit is applied to a family's tax liability, essentially what they owe. And if the credit is larger than what the family owes, they receive the benefit in the form of a refund or a refund check. In Ohio, last tax season, nearly 1 million families claimed the federal credit, and it brought over $2.3 billion in refunds into our state. The average refund was just over $2,000, and for many families, that's 2 to 3 months of income for low-wage working families. And many people say that this is actually the largest paycheck that some low-income families receive all year. Here's a map of states that have state earned income tax credits. And you can see from the map that there are 26 states, including the District of Columbia, that have state EITCs. You can also note from the colored map that nearly every state that has an earned income tax credit is refundable. Unfortunately, Ohio is one of 4 states that does not have a refundable credit. So the Ohio earned income tax credit is state EITCs are similarly designed to the federal EITC, and in those cases, if you're eligible for the federal earned income tax credit, you're also eligible for the state credit. Unfortunately, Ohio's credit is weak, and we, in fact, have about 3 design flaws. First, the credit has an income cap. Families earning over $20,000, many who are trying to earn their way out of the middle class, experience a benefit cliff and do not receive as much of the credit as they should. Also, the credit is low. The average state EITC in this country is 17% of the federal credit, but Ohio's is at 10%. And also, and probably one of the biggest flaws in our credit is that it's non-refundable. The federal, and from the map, most state EITCs are non-refundable. And refundability is important because it's what gives families and local communities an economic boost. And this is just an example to demonstrate refundability. So in this example, an average Ohio EITC worker earns between $21,000 and $39,000. And their amount is $142, and the taxpayer owes $100. With our current EITC, it eliminates $100 in tax liability, but unfortunately that $42 difference is lost. If Ohio had a refundable credit in that same example, that $42 would be returned to a family in an income check, a refund check. According to some analysis that we've done, specifically that Hannah's done, we find that the lack of refundability is the primary reason Ohio's EITC fails to reach workers that need the most help. And in fact, it only helps about 8% of Ohio's lowest wage workers. So we think Ohio should join other states that have more beneficial EITCs. An Ohio refundable non-capped EITC at 20% of the federal credit would provide 38% of Ohio's poorest with a tax cut. These eligible workers would see an average cut of $451. Many workers in this income category do not earn enough to pay Ohio income taxes, so much of their cut would be returned to them in the form of a tax refund. And research shows that most of this money would be used to provide a boost to local economies because families use these refunds to make essential purchases like child care, car, and home repairs. Essential purchases and also things, expenses that keep them in the workforce. For low-income Ohioans with an average income of $29,000, an improved EITC would keep them from falling into poverty. As I shared before, the federal EITC is the most effective anti-poverty program in the nation. And according to research done by our organization, it has lifted about 265,000 Ohioans out of poverty in the last tax year. So the poverty line for a family of four in 2016 is $24,300. And while we do not know at this time exactly how many Ohioans would be lifted out of poverty from the proposed EITC, and we do know that workers with income in the middle column level hover over the edge of poverty, and this policy could boost their income. So what can you do to help us advance a improved state EITC in Ohio? This is a phone number where you can contact your legislator and let them know that you care about this policy. Every year there is support for the state, a better state EITC. But unfortunately, in this current budget cycle, it just hasn't reached a top. I'm messed up with the slides. I'm sorry about that. So in this current budget cycle, you know, there have already been announcements of a shortfall, and they're already deciding to limit the proposed budget for programs. But you should know that there are ways to elevate this issue through the budget cycle, including contacting your legislator. This 1-800 number is through the Ohio General Assembly. You call this number and you give them your address, and they'll direct you to your appropriate legislator. Also, there's been a piece of legislation that's been introduced by State Senator Mike Skindell. And for the past several years, he has introduced legislation to make the state EITC better. And this year, this legislation has gotten more hearings than it has in the past. And our other partners that also support this issue, including Voices for Ohio's Children, the United Ways of Central Ohio and Greater Cincinnati, as well as the Ohio Association of Food Banks, weighed in on this legislation. The bill is being heard in the Senate Ways and Means Committee, which is being chaired by Senator John Eklund. And he could advance more hearings. And while this is a long shot, he could also advocate that it be put in the budget once it reaches the Senate. So contacting your state legislator and contacting Senator Eklund could be helpful, as well as writing op-eds or letters to the editor in your local community. I hope you know, and you should know, that your legislators actively follow your newspapers. And so when you write into your local newspaper about issues you care about, they let your legislators know that you care about them as well. So these are ways you can advance this policy in the state of Ohio. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Wendy Patton, and she's going to talk about public child care.
Thank you so much, Kalitha, and thank everyone who's on the webinar for joining us today. The third prong of work supports that I'll talk about today is public child care. I have provided in my comments a second look at Hannah's earlier chart on the largest occupational groups in Ohio. 3/4 of our largest occupational groups leave a parent with children in poverty, and that highlights the importance of public assistance to help working parents of low income pay the very high cost of child care. So, 3 challenges within the child care program that I'm going to talk about today, and the first simply has to do with the fact that the eligibility to get accepted into the public child care program is really too low. We aren't helping enough people. The chart on this slide shows that initial eligibility for a parent with one child, that parent can earn no more than about $20,826 a year. Now, if you look at the column all the way over on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that the level of self-sufficiency in Akron, Ohio, a metropolitan area, and this is for a safe, modest, yet decent style of life, is about $43,500 $500. So the parent earning about $21,000 with one child is very, very far below self-sufficiency. That parent is eligible. However, a parent at 145% of the federal poverty level, earning about $23,000 a year, is also very far from self-sufficiency and yet cannot get any child care assistance. In 2010, as recently as 2010, Ohio's eligibility level to get accepted to the public child care program was 200% of federal poverty. And you'll see in this chart that a parent with one child earning about $32,000 a year would have been eligible in 2010. They're still not up to the level of self-sufficiency, but they could have been eligible for some help with public child care. We would like to see the initial eligibility to get help with public child care assistance raised to the level of 200% of poverty. And the second, the bottom two rows there show you hourly wages. So right now, a parent with one child can make no more than about $10 an hour. If you have two kids, it's $12.60 an hour. We're talking about food service. We're talking about retail. And yet, if you look back at the chart that I just showed you, you'd see many low-wage jobs pay just a little bit over that level. And so we would like to see the initial program eligibility raised to 200% of poverty. Again, while it doesn't get families quite to the level of self-sufficiency, it offers assistance to many more poor working families. Now, there are some elements in Ohio's eligibility structure that are very good. A positive feature is that if you get in at a very low level and you stay in the program without interruption, you can stay in up to the level of self-sufficiency. In the current budget bill, the legislators did move the level of sort of the ceiling for where you can no longer receive assistance once you're in the program to 300% of poverty. At that level, most families have achieved self-sufficiency in most places of the state. The graph here shows the light blue area illustrates aid that the state provides to a family as they move up the income scale to self-sufficiency. The dark blue area represents the copay that the family is responsible for. Here in Ohio, we do not charge families making less than 100% of poverty any copay whatsoever, and that's a very good thing. And then as the family starts climbing to self-sufficiency, we don't let that copayment rise to more than about 9% of family income until the family reaches about 200% of poverty. And then the state aid tapers off as family income allows them to make the necessary payments for child care. So this is a very positive feature for people who have stable jobs. Next one, please. That brings us to our next challenge in child care, and that is the too few low-income jobs in our huge low-income labor market offer stability to workers. At present, families who are accepted into the child care program get up to about 3 months a year, once a year, if they lose their job. Now, if you lose your job twice within a year's time, the second time you only get 30 days. The problem is there is a great deal of churning within the low-wage labor market. Temporary jobs start and stop. Seasonal jobs are available at the right time and then they end. So, offices open and close, call centers open and close, factories still close a lot. So what we see for the million people in these giant low-wage labor markets in Ohio, there's a lot of instability. So being able to actually benefit by the extended eligibility once you're in the program benefits very few. For example, last year, the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services did look back over the last year and said, they serve about 114 to 120,000 children a year in our public child care assistance program. They looked back over the first year of extended eligibility, and they found that 973 families had been helped. That's a very tiny amount of families that get help from the extended eligibility, and that has to do not with problems that the families have. It has to do with the structure of our labor market. Jobs are not stable. Therefore, we need to have our public child care program, which exists to help people work, adapt to the conditions of the labor market. We need for children to have 12 months of eligibility when they're accepted to a classroom, regardless of what happens to a parent's job. This would also mirror the way our preschool program works, so that a child could go to preschool in the morning and have assistance in public child care in the afternoon without interruption. There's numerous benefits to this. It does promote family stability. It promotes stability for the child so that learning is maximized. Preschool and quality public child care can provide a tremendous learning environment and a social skills development environment for a child, but if a child bumps in and out of classrooms, it can be a terrifying experience. Further, a classroom full of new faces is an unhappy classroom. If you have toddlers, if you've been in preschool, you know what I mean. If you've got a couple of unhappy, scared, crying kids in a classroom, nobody learns. And so we benefit not only the family and the child, but an entire classroom of children if we stabilize those classrooms with 12-month continuous eligibility for people who are getting public child care assistance. Our third challenge then has to do with the quality of the care that we're offering children in our public child care program. Quality in classroom and the ability to learn is more important to young children than virtually any other time of life. It can have lifelong benefits, but we have not paid enough to create the kind of quality that we need in our public classrooms. The recommended reimbursement level for public child care would be at the 75th percentile of the market. Not the most expensive program, but up in, the top three-quarters of the group. This is a federal recommendation. The state of Ohio reimburses child care providers with accepting public child care at the 26th percentile of an older market rate, the 2014 market rate. So we're paying our child care providers for care being offered through the public child care program far below what the market offers. The National Women's Law Center surveys the states every year, and they found that in 2015, the recommended level at the 75th percentile of the current market for infant care in a center here in Ohio would be about $1,254 a week. The state of Ohio payment is $713. The reimbursement for a preschooler, a 4-year-old in a center, the 75th market percentile would be $910. The state of Ohio pays $570. There's a couple of problems with this. One, the reimbursement rate is so low that for a center that serves many children in public child care, and this can be geographically based, so in low-income neighborhoods, you may have providers who cannot hire teachers with the kinds of skill sets that you need to help young minds maximize learning. Number two, if you do have families that are able to geographically reach centers of higher quality, they may not accept public child care because the pay is too low. They feel that they can't afford to. So it limits the slots available for people who get public child care aid, and it can really restrict the quality of care of centers that serve a lot of public child care kids. So to review, the three key public child care issues that Advocates for Ohio's Future is worried about, Policy Matters Ohio is worried about, and I know you on the line are also worried about these important work support issues. One, initial eligibility is too low in Ohio's public child care program at 130% of poverty. It needs to be raised to 200% of the federal poverty level. And maybe we phase it in over time, but we need to get started on a plan to raise that level of initial aid. Number two, we need continuity in our public child care classrooms. Kids bounce in and out of classrooms as the parent's job changes. we need continuous eligibility that admits a child to a classroom for 1 full year, regardless of what happens to mom's job. And number 3, we need to improve the quality of our public child care. The payment to child care providers is simply too low. We need to raise reimbursement rates so that providers can actually afford to participate in the state of Ohio's Step Up to Quality program, which does provide enhanced payments as a child care center improves. The problem is too many centers lack the resources at the ground level to even start to step up to quality. So we need to boost our provider rates. The Early Child Care Advisory Council did approve a plan that would help providers start to step up. We don't see funding in the budget for that. So the budget is flat funded. The state budget in public child care is not better than it was last year, so we don't see progress on any of our 3 issues. And this brings us to the last slide, which is what you can do. One thing that we know is that legislators care about what their constituents have to say. And so your voice and your interest matters a lot on this and other issues we've talked about today. I recommend that each one of you subscribe to Groundwork Ohio newsletters and read their reports. They're the leading agency on child care in the state, and they have some really great materials that can teach you about the issues and the budget needs. I also encourage you to read more on Policy Matters Ohio's website. We've written a lot about public child care. You can sign up for our newsletter and get updates. We recommend that you talk to your elected officials of the state and tell them what you want and need for the child care program. And we suggest that each one of you check out what's happening in Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton as local resources are garnered to help boost preschool and early education in those areas. There's a lot going on, there's a lot to learn about, and your legislators want to hear from you.
All right. Well, thank you, Wendy, Kalitha, and Hannah. In addition to what Wendy just provided, I wanted to give you a couple other ways to get connected to us. So, unfortunately, they're not live links, but they will be in the presentation I send as a follow-up. But you can follow us both on Facebook and Twitter, both very active. Policy Matters is putting out reports pretty regularly, especially during the budget season, and we are doing the same. So that is a quick and easy way to kind of stay tuned to what we're doing. And also, even if you're not looking at what we are doing specifically, using the hashtag #PoorWhileWorking to join the conversation. AOS and our coalition partners try to use that as frequently as we can, just to make sure that folks are seeing kind of the big picture and what's happening in the state. And I know that, Hannah, you had one additional next step you wanted to add.
I just wanted to quickly invite everyone to join Policy Matters Ohio and the National Employment Law Project tomorrow at 2 p.m. on a webinar to learn about how we can make Ohio's unemployment compensation system work for working people, but also stay solvent. That was a big issue over the winter with some legislation trying to cut weeks down to as few as 12 weeks of unemployment compensation. So if you're interested in learning about unemployment financing or getting an update on where that stands here in the state, please join us tomorrow at 2. I will post the registration link to the attendee chat board if folks are interested, and you can always just give me a call. Thanks.
Thanks, Hannah. All right. Well, at this point, we are going to open it up to questions. You can either ask a question by typing it into the chat box, or, as I mentioned earlier, you can also type it into the Q&A button that's at the top of your screen. All right. I'm assuming this one is for you, Wendy. Is this one for 1 month?
Yeah. This is the amount that I show on our slides is taken from the National Women's Law Center's appendix tables, and it is per week. And Rachel, I can send you a link to that publication and that appendix.
All right. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, if you have some, you are always welcome to send them to me. If you think of them later, I'm happy to get in touch with our presenters and to follow up with you. Oh, we did get one more. All right. So I heard that Snap to Skills is only available in Cleveland. Is this true?
So
I don't know if you want to take that, Hannah.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Rebecca?
Yes.
Okay. So Snap to Skills could be a statewide program. Right now there are 3 pilot programs happening, one in Cuyahoga County, one in Hamilton, and one in Franklin. So what we're hoping to see is greater state investment and really get the state to sort of explain how other places, how other counties, local partners, community colleges, nonprofit organizations that want to provide employment and training services to SNAP recipients or those programs and supports that can help reduce employment barriers, how those folks can form partnerships and participate in this federal 50% reimbursement fund. The goal really is to kind of get this model to scale and make it available statewide and to get the rules in place so that people can start working toward building that out here. Thanks for that question, Darcy.
And it looks like there was a follow-up to that. How do you go about getting that training?
All right, so I would suggest if you're in one of those counties that have it or if you're in a county that does not have it, you could ask your county JFS agency. They should be able to direct you to that. Again, those programs are just getting going, so some of those pilots, I believe Hamilton is taking is up to the point of actually getting folks enrolled in through training. I'm not sure about the status of the other ones. So they may not be
and it looks like we
open yet.
All right. I think that we have one more SNAP question. So on SNAP mandatory ENT and ABAWD rules, are there pending rules that are changing who is exempt from WP? And if yes, can you explain?
Okay, Rachel, that is a really good question. So the ABED time limits, the 3-month time limits, is a federal requirement that we're sort of stuck with. The other sort of whether employment and training or these kinds of activities are mandatory for non-ABED populations is something that could be changed through administrative rulemaking or by the state legislature making that change. There was a rule that was posted for comment, rule change posted for comment a few weeks ago from ODJFS that clarified some of the rules around who is mandatory for employment and training and who is mandatory for work registration. So there is some efforts to clarify that, and we'll kind of have to wait and see what that final rule actually looks like. In our proposal, we suggest that any SNAP ENT program that is built around this idea of going after the 50% reimbursement money should follow that Washington state model and just be all voluntary. It works better for the folks that are participating in the training. It works better for the partners trying to administer these programs, and that's really sort of the best practice for providing those services. So that's what we're encouraging the state to do and to really make this something that works for all of the parties involved and not just sort of a compliance model that could just drive people off the rolls. That doesn't serve anyone.
All right, thanks. That looks like it is the end of the questions that I got. Give me 1 second to move us forward. All right. So thank you again to all of our webinar speakers for giving us a better understanding of how state lawmakers can support Ohio workers in the state budget. I also want to thank everyone who spent their lunch hour with us. And if you appreciated the information in today's webinar, I hope you'll consider making a donation to help Advocates for Ohio's Future continue to offer great webinars and resources to you and advocates in the future. Your gift truly does make our work possible, and through a matching campaign with our long-term partners at the George Glenn Foundation, your donation will be matched dollar for dollar, which means that you're doubling your impact. So your gift of $5 becomes $10, $10 becomes $20, all up to $10,000, which will all go towards our work to strengthen Ohio's public services. Well, thank you all again, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.